I declare the special council meeting of the 1st of February 2022 held in council chambers at the City of Subiaco open at 5:01 p.m. I welcome councillors, staff, the media and members of the public. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. We pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Please note this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings will be made available on the City's website following the meeting. Confidential sections of council meetings, if any, will not be live streamed or recorded. And we've just discussed amongst ourselves that we'll be wearing masks if not speaking, but removing masks when it's our turn to speak. Okay, attendance, apologies or leave of absence. I note that we've got everyone here. Does anyone have a leave of absence or anything else to submit? No. Disclosure of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest in relation to tonight's item? Councillor Kosovich.
I, Gary John Kosovich, declare a conflict of interest by way of impartiality pursuant to clause 22, subsection 2 of the Code of Conduct for council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is, I have in the past, prior to being elected into offices at the City of Subiaco Councillor, opposed this development application and have submitted statements opposing the development application to the City of Subiaco Council and the State Administrative Tribunal. I declare I will consider this matter on its planning merits in that it is an amended development application and vote accordingly.
Thank you. No other disclosures? Public question time. We've got no questions submitted prior and it doesn't look like anyone's asking a question. What does that mean? You've got questions you'd like to ask? Both of you? Yeah, okay. Well, if one of the staff could facilitate that, that'd be great.
There you go. My name's Eric Streitberg. I'm an owner of an apartment in 281 Hay Street, which is adjacent to this development. I have a question. I'm not sure who to address it to. First of all, why is there a special council meeting called for this development? What's the circumstances that lead to there being essentially an out of session council meeting for this?
Well, look, I'll answer that. You've got another question to follow, do you?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll ask that and then I'll deal with both the questions or defer to a staff member.
And I see no evidence of them being accepted or acted on or acknowledged. And I'd quite like to know whether I wasted my time in doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those two questions. The first question I can answer, and I signed a notice requesting that this special meeting be called because the city has an opportunity to provide input into the responsible authority report that gets submitted to the Joint Development and Assessment Panel. Because of the timing of the panel's meeting at which they're going to deal with this application, we would have missed out on the opportunity to comment if we hadn't called a special council meeting. So we've had to call this meeting to fit in with the JDAB's timeframe. Now, as to your second question as to whether you've wasted your time, I'll defer to the Acting Director, Alex Petrovski.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. public consultation is one important component of development assessment, so there would have been a period for that, and I'd say that you haven't wasted your time, and that the comments that have come out through the public consultation process have been duly considered in issues. We don't actually put people's names on there so as to allow free-flowing public consultation to occur and comments to be provided. So they are summarised and they do form part of the responsible authority report going to council as a recommender and the DAP as a decision maker.
Okay, we've got another person in the gallery who'd like to ask some questions. If you could approach the podium, please.
Can you hear me all right? My name is Gillian Anderson. I am the owner-occupier of apartment A at 281 Hay Street, and there is a whole raft of social impacts of this building on my lifestyle, not to mention the fact that the balconies of the neighbouring apartments will be able to be at least 3 metres from my balcony, looking over my balcony, and the building's height and breadth would severely impact my air-conditioned outlet. The other thing is that there's a whole raft of engineering issues, such as what will be done with the sewerage pipes that run from Olive Street under our building, under 181 Churchill and into Churchill Avenue. I don't see anything on the plans or any conversations or anything written about what will be done with those pipes. We've already had issues when Intraflow flushed the sewerage pipes, in that other pipes weren't on the plan and the sewerage waste came up through into our wells, into our car parks, into our basement, into our lift cavity. And we had to have everything pumped out, hygienically clean and industrial clean. I want to know, has anybody considered the pipes that go underneath this proposed development and underneath the other buildings in the area? The other thing I'd like...
Sorry, I've just cut you off and I'll let you speak in a moment, but we'll take that as question one. And is there a further question that you're in the middle of? Okay.
So this development was given the go-ahead, unfortunately, and with the result is that the developer now requires our building to be pinned or underpinned before the developer can erect his building. So now this building is encroaching on our building, and I want to know, was there any undertaking of any kind as to the size of this development and the impact it would have to be able to be built on other buildings?
Thanks for the questions. I think both of those are best answered by one of the staff who've prepared their report to council. I'll defer to Mr. Anthony Denham. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. Thanks, Gillian. We did receive your email and we're currently working through a response on that. So in the next couple of days, we'll get a response to you on those questions. I can respond to some of the questions now. In relation to the balconies that you've raised a concern with, and also the lot boundary setbacks, they haven't changed from what was approved in 2016. So we're not, I guess, under the current application, they're seeking an amendment to the current approval. Anything that's already approved and not changing, we can't actually alter because it's already approved. In relation to the pipes and the servicing, that is normally done at a later date, and there's other agencies that come into play at that stage. So Water Corporation, for instance, would look at the capacity for this development to be accommodated within their servicing network. Similarly, with the construction-related concerns that you've expressed, those concerns are normally done prior to issue of a building permit after planning approval has been obtained, and that those issues are worked through before the building permit is issued.
I'm not sure if we're taking questions from councillors, Councillor Strad, but okay, what is it then?
It's not a question. I just noticed the first speaker was a bit confused where the RAR was, and I thought perhaps we should point out it is an attachment. If it goes to the city website where the staff report is, the RAR is an attachment on the city website that you can pull down and read. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, that looks like we're at the end of our public questions now, so thank you for those. And that brings us to announcements by the presiding member. And I do just have two, given that I haven't had a chance of late to provide you with a written mayoral update. The first is that Subiaco has a new appointee to Development WA's Land Redevelopment Committee. Councillor Mark Burns, congratulations. No doubt you'll enjoy that seat back at the table, which you've occupied in the past. Some of you may recall that there were 3 city nominees whose names were put up, and fortunately you've been chosen as the successful person, so we trust you'll represent us well. Not that you'll be able to feed anything back to us, because the meetings are of course confidential, but it's all territory which you've covered before, so all the best to you, Mark. Now, the second announcement relates to a meeting which CEO Colin Cameron and I attended on the 20th of January. We had the good fortune to meet with the Honourable Rita Safiotti, who of course is the Minister for Planning, amongst other things. And Mr Cameron and I took the opportunity to raise a number of planning related issues that are of importance to Subiaco and our community. I'll just run you through some of the bigger ticket items just so that everyone's up to speed. The first issue relates to a proposed development at 450 Hay Street. The developer, as you may know from some of my emails to you all, has submitted an application to the Special Development Assessment Unit. Interestingly, it affects the city's land, but the city hasn't consented to the application or signed it. So the city's taking an interest in this particular development, as is the WAPC, because in addition to the nature of the application, there's also the rather delicate issue of heritage arguments and a local development plan that the city's recently approved. The second issue we took the opportunity to run the Minister through was the conversion of Roberts Road and Hay Street to two-way. Another issue we ran the Minister through was the transition zones, or lack thereof, under LPS 5, and the tension that's been created in old residential areas where traditional R15 lots have now found themselves abutting blocks as high as R100. And last but not least, one of the big ticket items we took the opportunity to run the Minister through related to the Subiaco East redevelopment and the very real planning problems that will be faced in years to come when, under current Development WA planning, future populations will be accommodated in that area, but without the benefit of sufficient active open playing fields. And Mr Cameron and I discussed our hope that the city and the state would be able to work together to find a solution to that issue. Now, I'm not going to represent that any traction or promises were made on these issues, but we've aired them, and hopefully a dialogue can continue. We were fortunate to have at that meeting Katrina Stratton, MLA, who is of course a member for Netherlands. And I think if the last few years have taught the people of Subiaco anything about politics, it's that we need all the friends we can get at a state government level. So we were pleased to have Dr Stratton with us, and she's someone who I think appreciates that we're representing the same people here in Subiaco, and I hope we'll be able to leverage off that for Subiaco's benefit in coming years. We'll talk more about these issues at our workshop and at a later date, but I just wanted the chance to run you through those at this first available opportunity. So with those announcements over, just remember we're going to stay back afterwards for a workshop, and it's going to be the first in a more council-led annual calendar of workshops and strategic briefings for this year. So thanks everyone for attending this special council meeting, and let's get on to the item of the day. Okay, we've just got one substantive item on tonight's agenda, of course, and that is SC1, a responsible authority report in relation to 263 to 277 Hayes Street and 17 to 19 Olive Street, Subiaco. The officer report recommending that council support the approval of the development application, or rather the amendment to the existing application. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation? This is interesting. Okay, Councillor Hammersley, are you moving or asking a question? Okay, thank you. Councillor De Vries? Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hammersley, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you. Yes, reluctantly moving because, you know, it's very disappointing to see this application come nearly 6 years after the approval. I do think it's incumbent on us to let the people who are concerned about this development know that the position that the council and the city officers who have to prepare the report are in legally is that we can't go back and reassess the entire application. The application has been approved by the DAP, and nobody has taken any action to set aside that approval, which could only be achieved in the Supreme Court at great expense and at great risk. So all we are able to do here is to assess the amendments, so only the bits of the bill that are changing, and we have to do that against the current planning framework, which is the exercise that has been undertaken in the Responsible Authority report. So there's really very little scope for addressing the broader concerns, which I would like to acknowledge. We also can't address the fact that this building is somewhat out of date because we do have a new planning scheme, and importantly, the state has brought into being minimum standards for apartments, which are intended to try and make inner-city living a viable option for people for more than just bunking down until they can afford something better, thus continuing the urban sprawl. But anyway, that's the situation we find ourselves in. It's not an easy thing for me personally to just let these things go through, but we're sitting here as statutory decision makers under the planning law, and it's incumbent on us to wear that hat rather than perhaps our councillor hat. So, as I said, reluctantly moving, but I think we do need to make a decision. We've called a special meeting, and it would be a bit sad not to have actually brought this on. The other thing is that I will be at some point, perhaps shortly, seeking to have a discussion with the council and the staff about some legal advice that we've received. And I can't say much about that in the open forum, but I think it's important that we do, and so we'll probably come to that, but I'll be quiet for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hammersley. Councillor De Vries, did you wish to speak to the item?
I just wish to make clear that I'm not speaking to the item, but I did second it in order for the debate to proceed tonight, and I won't be reserving my right. I won't be speaking to it later, except to ask questions or, in normal debate. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers against the item? Councillor Burns.
what's taken place in the last few minutes with the hesitancy to even find a mover and a seconder, and a report in front of us from the staff recommending approval. Perhaps we could have some comment with regard at your direction from staff or whoever you think is appropriate, that if this matter doesn't get up, where are we going to be? We're going to, we're only having this special council meeting because we need to get something to DAP. If it doesn't find legs, or I suppose we could, somebody could move a refusal, and it's sent that way, but it would be sent almost without. It'd be very difficult at this stage to be, patching together wording. So I'm a little concerned. I can even see it behind Councillor Hammersley's eyes that I think we just need a little perhaps caution or discussion or advice from the staff as to where we're heading when we move into perhaps further debate, exactly where we're going to end up if we're not careful.
I might comment on that first and see what Mr. Petrovski's got to add. I suppose the nature of these responsible authority report related items that council deals with is that officers prepare their comment, and that's their exercise in professional judgment, and that's going to get sent to the JDAP, whatever we resolve. We've got an opportunity to approve our own comments supporting the development, or we could alternatively, like you say, resolve not to support the development, and either way that resolution is essentially going to appear as a comment that sits alongside the officer report to the JDAP. But Mr. Petrovski, did you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. What's really needs to be made really clear is that this isn't a decision on the development in a whole. It's a decision on the changes proposed, the minor changes proposed as part of the development. So council should consider it in that context. So it's the changes that occurred. Now, there is a time frame on planning approvals, and it's for a very good reason that standards change and improve all the time, and so does thinking around planning. So if this one is at the later end, given the extension provided by the Minister's powers, and if we had our time again, it would be a very different assessment under the R codes. However, the changes considered on balance, the changes proposed by the applicant improve the development from what was previously approved. So even if the changes are recommended for refusal by council and also refused by the JDAP, the applicant can still develop the approval that was issued in 2016. So that would still be on the table and that will still stand. On balance, the changes proposed improve the development to the scale that they can, which is why we are recommending approval as officers. What has been very clear in our assessment and dealings with the applicant in this instance is that we have made it very clear that an extension of time has not been considered and have been upfront on that. So in any event, whether the changes are approved or not, substantial commencement is required by the end of April this year, unless that's changed. However, we've made it very clear, and the applicant has made it clear to us that that is not what they are seeking.
Any other questions or speakers? Councillor Kosovich.
I've got a series of questions that I'd like to raise just in relation to the amended DA, if I may, thanks, and by you, Mayor, and I'll direct them towards Mr. Petrovski and his team. Thank you. Section 152 and Section 153 of the Planning Development Act 2005 stipulates, fogging up here, stipulates 10% of public open space and deep soil plantings are to be provided in all development applications. The applicant's plans do not appear to meet those statutory obligations. Has the applicant made concessions in that regard, and will they be compensating by way of cash in lieu of land, in effect paying the city a fee of 10% of the land value of the property? And finally, about just that question, has that compensation been paid? That's the first question. I'll allow a response, if I may. Thanks.
Okay, we'll deal with them one at a time. Mr. Petrosky, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. This is, so sections 152 and 153 of the Planning and Development Act relate to subdivision of land. So what we have done is we've included an advice note requiring public open space be provided on this site. Now, the Act also then says where public open space can't be provided, you provide a cash in lieu contribution for that public open space, and there's a sum of value. So that's actually enforced through a subdivision application. So if this development was to be developed and then they go through a strata subdivision with the Commission, we are providing early advice to the applicant that the city's recommendation would be that a condition requiring the public open space and therefore the cash in lieu be imposed. So it's providing early notice to that. Now, this is a matter which is currently being tested in the tribunal through another local government as they've applied such conditions, so we'll be keeping tabs on that as it goes.
And my next question. In the originating development application, there was a requirement on the applicant to provide dilapidation reports for nearby residences. Can you confirm that this amended development application is still subject to the requirement of dilapidation reports? And if so, does it comply with the city's new policy on dilapidation reports?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So dilapidation reports will be required as per the original approval, and through the advice note we would have to be satisfied that the level and state of those dilapidation reports are to the city's satisfaction in accordance with the city's current policy.
Thank you. As I understand it, the applicant has provided the city with a waste management plan for this amended development application. Can we see it, please? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, it was a condition of approval on the previous development application which was approved that a waste management plan be provided and finalised to the city's satisfaction. So that would need to occur as a condition of approval. So we don't actually have it at the moment, but it's not something that is insurmountable that wouldn't be able to be provided as the development application progresses, and it would need to be to the city's satisfaction.
Thank you. And my final question. This is a large-scale 6-storey development, inclusive of multiple dwellings, retail, office, commercial floor space and basement parking on a significant site at the corner of Hay Street and Olive Street, Subiaco. And accordingly, there is a requirement for the applicant to provide something tangible in the plans that gives back to the community. How is this amended development application giving back to the community?
Thank you, and through presiding member. So as I briefly explained previously, the original application was approved at the planning framework at the time, which didn't have those key community benefits. Now, when we updated local planning scheme number 5, we have included the provision for those specific community benefits to be provided. Given that the changes proposed are relating to design elements, that was not assessed, so there's no ability for us to require additional community benefits be provided. It's about the scope of the changes, really relating to the design measures which are proposed. So it was considered at the planning framework at the time that they didn't actually require a significant community benefit to be provided.
Any other questions? Councillor Stroud.
Yes, thank you, Mayor McMullen. As elected members know, I have been pursuing the situation of proposal of 16 bike bays on the verge of Hay Street, and how that really is not contributing to any good streetscape look. So I've been working through with the city on this, and whether more could be incorporated into the building, and this may result in some sort of amendment. But I also progressed, and I don't think I've got an answer yet, so this is my question. I also progressed the idea that, well, if we are to have 16 bike bays on the verge, there's an obvious gap in trees, lack of trees, and could we ask the developer to plant 2 to 3 trees that would match the maturity of the present trees? And if that's the case, that would be an amendment that I'll propose in the future once this question is answered. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. There's no issue in requesting that be undertaken by the applicant and or developer. I mean, the verge is within the city's realm, so the city could do that in any event. Given that there's probably no policy relating to it, it might be a difficult mechanism to enforce as a condition of approval, but there's no issue in requesting that. With regard to the bicycle bays, it's a recommended condition of approval that the location of the bays, the nature, how many and so forth, and the amenities surrounding them would need to be signed off by the city, and it would be in the city's land to be maintained by the development. So it's not a just go and install them, it would be to the city's satisfaction, and we'd consider a multitude of things.
So thank you, Mayor. So that multitude of things could actually include landscaping around the bike bays, and therefore back to this condition that you're saying can't be a condition of planting more trees. How can we bring it in to make it work and get a better streetscape outcome?
Thank you. And through you, presiding member, it would need to fairly and reasonably relate to it. So if the bicycle bays and parking is presented neatly and there's maybe some small or minor plantings around that, it's probably something that's quite easily arguable to say that it reasonably relates to it. But if you're asking for mature trees to be planted in there, then it doesn't actually relate to the condition that's being requested. And there's no, I guess the condition for the bicycle bays comes from the city's local planning policy, which provides a planning purpose for that condition. And we don't have that sort of condition on mature trees to be planted. So again, it can be something that's requested, it can be something that the city does off its own bat in any event as well.
And thank you. Final question. And therefore I assume that it couldn't be a condition of JDAP either in their approval?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. I guess the planning advice that we're providing to you is that the condition doesn't necessarily have a planning purpose and would be difficult to enforce. So it would be unlikely that the JDAP would impose it.
So how does it really come about? Because in my 11 years, I can't recall any of this, except perhaps the Chippers build where they imposed community benefits on our land. How does it just come about that this building development can impose on our verge 16 bike bays? Now, I can understand for visitors, but for staff, it's such an unsatisfactory outcome, and it really is an ugly outcome. So how's it got to this, and why can't the development take responsibility, at the very least, for supplying the bike bays within the development for the staff and residents, I assume?
Thank you, and through you, presiding mayor. So the development is providing 39 bicycle bays on its own site. And the 16 bays and within the verge are additional. We, as officers, see that as some community benefit in that there's available bicycle parking around. So when you have visitor bicycle parking, you'd want it to be in a space that's easily accessible, so you wouldn't have to go down a ramp or anything along those lines, and that has good passive surveillance. So if council does not want to recommend the condition of the additional bicycle bays, and that's up to council not to recommend that, and then it's probably likely that the JDAP wouldn't impose that condition in any event. Even if the condition is imposed, and through a solution through the applicant and the city, and with discussion with elected members, if we only fit 8 or 10, it is then up to the city's discretion to clear that condition. So there is scope in that as well. But we see it as a positive amenity and an attribute to the surrounding locality.
How did you come up with 16 though? Because nowhere else in the city do we have such a provision of bike bays. It's usually just 2, 3, 4. So 16 just seems to be largesse, particularly if there is 39, which I didn't pick up. 39, I read a far smaller number than that, but fair enough. But how do we possibly come up with 16?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. I'm not sure how the exact number of 16 came about, but as Mr. Petrovsky pointed out, this development, in terms of on-site bicycle parking requirements, this development requires a total of 83 bays. That's 44 for residential and 39 for commercial. So on-site they're providing 82. So they've currently got a shortfall of one bicycle space essentially. Now they are proposing 16 in the verge. This has been reviewed by the city's Transport and Infrastructure Department team, and they're happy with the additional bicycle parking facilities. It is consistent with, I guess, modal shift as well, in encouraging people from not necessarily driving their cars to the property. I ride a bike regularly. I've got a lot of friends that ride, and if they want to ride to a particular destination, it's not uncommon for them to check on Google Street View to see if there's any external amenities, such as bike racks, which are visible to them. And that may actually be the difference between them riding somewhere or not. So we consider that this is a positive contribution to the streetscape. In terms of the area it actually occupies of that frontage, the Hay Street frontage for the sites is approximately 42.7 metres in length. The bicycle racks occupy 6.1 metres of that, which is about 14%, which is not considered a huge amount. But as Mr. Petrovsky pointed out, if council wanted to reduce the number of bicycle spaces, that they're in a position to do that, it would be recommended that you specify a maximum that you'd want in the verge, though, so we got some direction to give to JDAP.
Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, this is a question relating to the increase of restaurants or cafe restaurants from 1 to 3. I'm just looking at the plans. Given that that's a sizable increase, is that going to take up more of the ground floor footprint? I can't actually see on the plans where those restaurants are, and I think we have to at least address the concerns of the resident who said that they're worried that would increase, waste and noise and cause greater sort of impact on their amenity. Is there any way to reassure residents that there will not be an increase? Because 3 restaurants is significantly more than 1, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So on the floor plan, the ground floor plan. It shows that the 3 proposed restaurant tenancies are in the northeastern corner, so the corner of Hay and Olive. So they are across the road, directly across the road. It's a commercial type tenancy, and the owners of the apartments that have spoken earlier tonight, they are further west along Hay Street, so they're further away. As has been mentioned earlier, in relation to the waste management, that is a condition of the approval. So the applicant still, if this was to be approved, the applicant's got to submit a waste management plan. It's got to be, verified by our waste management team, and they'll look at the current and future requirements of that for all the different tenancies and the land uses. So we're comfortable with that. And in terms of noise, as I said, it is on a main street, but it's also, the noise is governed by a separate legislation as well.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'd like to bring up one of the points raised by Ms Anderson earlier, and that's in regard to the sewer main. Now, I believe the Water Corporation has objected to the proposal as it's been put. It says that there's an existing sewer main that traverses the subject area, and from the information provided, that hasn't been considered. They've said that they want the developer or their consultant engineer to contact them to find out what can be undertaken to resolve the situation. Do you know whether there has been any movement on that? And secondly, how would we find out if that has been resolved between the Water Corporation and the developer?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So in relation to the Water Corporation's comments, in that they do object. Normally these detailed designs aren't really, fleshed out until the building permit stage. So they'll kind of establish an engineering solution once the planning approval has been achieved, and they'll have to overcome a range of obstacles. So the planning approval is the first, in a whole suite and range of approvals that the applicant will have to go through. The city's not aware of any discussion that the applicant has had with Water Corp regarding that. That may be in the future if the city has to get involved with partial road closures, if that was to be the case. But we haven't been advised of any of that, because that would be detailed design in the future.
So would that have to be sorted out before approval was given by either us or JDAP? Do we need to know that an impediment has been fixed, etc.?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. As Mr. Petrovsky has flagged a couple of times tonight, this development has already been approved back in 2016. So that has been approved. We're just considering the amendments to the design, and they will eventually need to get some sort of approval from Water Corporation and a range of other agencies and stakeholders as they go forward.
And if I can, just one follow-up question on the waste management. In previous RARs, we have seen waste management plans. They've had 6 years to come up with one. Have they given any reason why they haven't?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, not that we're aware of.
Any other questions or speakers? Councillor White.
Thank you. A quick question. I'm finding a little incongruous in terms of the discussions and the summary in the report that we've received, saying there are no social and environmental implications to this. all the questions seem to be social and environmental. I'm wondering why there are no implications that the staff are saying to this proposal. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So the social and environmental implications is a template as a result of that report. That's separate to the planning framework and legislation that we assess it under. So any environmental or social impacts and amenity impacts is actually assessed as part of the planning application and attached in the element objectives assessment, for example. It's not as, and that's contained within the RAR, it's not as a result of the responsible authority report. So the decision and decision making on planning matters needs to be against the planning framework, which sets them out. So that assessment is just undertaken somewhere else.
Sorry, if I may, just my own education. So it's irrelevant, in fact, for this subject. Through you, Mayor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It's not irrelevant. Those impacts have been considered and they're in the planning assessment in the responsible authority report. The council report is only attaching the officer recommendation responsible authority report. So they didn't need to be duplicated in the formal council agenda.
Any other speakers to the item? Councillor Burns.
I'm going to move under the procedural matter under 7.12 that we go behind closed doors, because I think there's other matters that there are councillors that would like to speak on. I would note that for the public's point of view, that I'm not a fan of going behind closed doors, but in circumstances and matters that are legal and financial, I think it's necessary. And I'd like to put that to the vote to go behind closed doors.
Okay, before I look for a seconder, maybe we can just get the procedural motion written up on the screen so that we all know what we're voting on. Legal advice, yeah. Councillor Hamsley, we're going to insert a reason, but you've got a question. Okay, so we've got a procedural motion to go behind closed doors in accordance with clause 7.1H of the Meeting Procedures Local Law, the reason being that we'll be considering legal advice, which is a reason for closing the meeting under section 5.232D of the Local Government Act. We've got a mover in, Councillor Burns. Now we need a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Stroud. Let's put that to the vote. Okay, that's carried 8-1. So we're going to go behind closed doors. Members of the gallery and media, you'll have to leave for this particular discussion, but you're welcome to come back when we've discussed the legal advice. Thank you. Councillors, having discussed the legal advice, we're now back in an open session, and I'm going to look for any final speakers before I ask the original mover to close. Councillor Stroud.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. For the benefit of the gallery, first I'd just like to raise the fact that neighbouring buildings and occupants do have the opportunity for the dilapidation reports. It's a requirement of it's a condition of both the demolition of the site as well as the construction of the site. It's organised by the developer, it's paid for by the developer, and we now have a policy to ensure the standard of the dilapidation reports. So I recommend you look to our policy on that when your opportunity arises. The next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to do something about this verge, and and I was just thinking perhaps the best approach is to stay with the 16 bicycle bays and to ask the staff to prepare a request for a contribution by the developer towards the planting of mature trees in the line, consistent with the trees, both the type of tree and the spacing of the tree that is in front of 263 Hay Street. And we would argue that, the support for that, on the very basis that we are supporting giving up our verge for 16 bicycle bays. So the amendment would be something, we don't necessarily have to get the exact words perhaps of the amendment, but so much that the staff propose the suitable wording to request for the planting of, for the developer to fund an appropriate number of trees, both in type and spacing, to the trees in front of 263, which I sent to you in front of in an email. Can I ask through you, Mayor, if the staff are happy to work with that?
Okay, look, a question for staff. Is there anything in what Councillor Stroud has said that would enable you to draft an amendment to the current officer recommendation for our consideration before we vote on it? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Presiding Member. What I would say is that Condition 31 allows us to work with the applicants on having the right dimensions and specifications for the verge, and that's within existing. Everything, all the new conditions that have been provided are consistent with the plans and wouldn't fall into an argument of the applicant requiring additional time to consider these things. So it's just something that I would recommend Council consider, because this is something new. It's not really related to anything that's occurring given its mature trees. So Council may want to consider whether that would then provide the applicant with the question on we need more time to consider these things. Yeah. That's the only thing I would say, because all the other conditions relate to the plans and what has actually been proposed in our what has been proposed by the applicant. So we can do it. We can ask for a condition. And we can provide the wording if Council requires it. We probably don't have to do it now, but we can do it consistent with the Council's recommendation. There's no issues in that. Whether it's got a planning purpose and whether it's something that can be imposed is a different question. And I don't think from this reading we could recommend something along those lines, but it is possible to do.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I'll accept the staff recommendation. We don't want to give any cause for delay, any argument for delay on this. So I'll let it go. Thank you.
Any more speakers to the item? Councillor Burns.
Just very briefly, Mayor McMullen and councillors, for the benefit of the young lady that tolerated being put outside for such a long time. There are multiple of the issues. I took note of the issues you raised, and there are a plethora of statutory protections for you. Not for all of them, but I wouldn't be as concerned as perhaps you are right now. And I'm sure the staff are quite happy to discuss them during, if this does get legs underneath it, to discuss your options with you. That's all.
Okay, I think it might be time to ask Councillor Hammersley to close, if you like. Okay, I'll call the vote. That's been carried 8-1. Okay, there being no further business, I declare the City of Subiaco Special Council meeting of the 1st of February 2022 closed at 6:52 p.m. Thanks, everyone.